Good morning. Welcome to worship here at First Parish in Framingham. I'm the Reverend Aaron Stockwell, and it is an honor and a joy to serve as your senior minister. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. That means it doesn't matter your age, your race, your ethnicity, how you move around in the world, what your family looks like, who you love, or what you believe. It doesn't matter how you are participating in this service, whether you are here in this old house, whether you are one of the 11 people watching on Zoom, good morning to you, or the countless number who are watching on the live stream. We don't have a way in the moment of counting how many are there. Or maybe you're watching this sometime later in the week. Unitarian Universalism is a faith for all souls. Whoever you are, wherever you have come from, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We celebrate all of who you are. There are many additional activities on the back of your order of service, some happening this afternoon, some are volunteer opportunities that I draw your attention to. Or if you're joining online, I think all of those were in the Faithful Dispatch on Thursday. I thank all of you who made this service possible, our staff, Robin and Andre, who greeted you this morning if you were here in person. Thank you as well to Keith Nelson, who is operating the camera. Thank you as well to Karen Greenberger for these beautiful chancel decorations. Take an opportunity after the service to get a little bit closer and observe them. Karen writes, "This is my artistic interpretation of a labyrinth dedicated to our spiritual gathering on the first day of spring, also dedicated to my mother who appreciated art in its many forms." This morning we have a guest preacher with us who will be sharing an audio sermon. Back when I booked Barb to preach in December, I think it was, we weren't sure what was going to be going on. So if you have noticed that Barb is not here with us in person, you're correct. He is not here. Friends, since 1701, love has gathered together the congregation known as the First Parish in Framingham. Those people were seeking peace and seeking meaning, and they were a lot like you, though they were also different. Whether this is your first time or your 3,000th time, welcome to the First Parish in Framingham. On this first day of spring, which for us in the Eastern time zone begins at 11:33 this morning, I share these words for spring by the poet Langston Hughes, who writes these words. "In time of silver spring, the earth puts forth new life again. Green grasses grow and flowers lift their heads. And over all the plain the wonder spreads of life, of life, of life. In time of silver rain, the butterflies lift silken wings to catch a rainbow cry, and trees put forth new leaves to sing in joy beneath the sky, when spring and life are new." On this day of the vernal equinox, the day when spring begins, I light the chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, for this renewing season of spring.
Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. Thank you, choir. It is so delightful to hear your voices. Our story this morning is one of my favorites. It was written by Mem Fox and illustrated by Julie Vivas, and it is called Wilfred, Gordon, Mcdonald, Partridge. There was once a small boy called Wilfred, Gordon, Mcdonald, Partridge, and what's more, he wasn't very old either. His house was next door to an old people's home, and he knew all the people who lived there. He liked Mrs. Jordan, who played the organ. He listened to Mr. Hosking, who told him scary stories. He played with Mr. Tippett, who was crazy about cricket. He ran errands for Miss Mitchell, who walked with a wooden stick. And he admired Mrs. Drisdale, who had a voice like a giant. But his favorite person of all was Miss Nancy Allison Delacourt Cooper, because she had 4 names, just like he did. He called her Miss Nancy and told her all his secrets. One day, Wilfred Gordon heard his mother and father talking about Miss Nancy. "Poor old thing," said his mother. "Why is she a poor old thing?" asked Wilfred Gordon. "Because she's lost her memory," said his mother. After all, not very surprising. She is 96. What's a memory? Asked Wilfred Gordon. He was always asking questions. It's something you remember, said his father. But Wilfred Gordon wanted to know more. So he called on Mrs. Jordan, who played the organ. What's a memory? He asked. Something warm, my child. Something warm. He called on Mr. Hosking, who told him scary stories. What's a memory? He asked. Something from long ago, me lad. Something from long ago. He called on Mr. Tippett, who was crazy about cricket. What's a memory? He asked. Something that makes you cry, my boy. Something that makes you cry. He called on Miss Mitchell, who walked with a wooden stick. What's a memory? He asked. Something that makes you laugh, my darling. Something that makes you laugh. He called on Mr. Drisdale, who had a voice like a giant. What's a memory? He asked. Something as precious as gold, young man. Something as precious as gold. So Wilfred Gordon went home again to look for memories for Miss Nancy, because she had lost her own. He looked for the old shoebox of shells that he had found long ago, last summer, and put them gently in a basket. He found the puppet on strings, which always made everyone laugh, and put that in the basket too. He remembered with sadness the medal which his grandfather had given him, and placed it gently next to the shells. Next, he found his football, which was as precious as gold. And last of all, on his way to Miss Nancy's, he went into the hen house and took a fresh, warm egg from under a hen. Then Wilfred Gordon called on Miss Nancy and gave her each thing, one by one. What a dear, strange child to bring me all these wonderful things, thought Miss Nancy. And then she started to remember. She held the warm egg and told Wilfred Gordon about the tiny speckled blue eggs that she had once found in a bird's nest at her aunt's garden. She put a shell into her ear, or up to her ear, and remembered going to the beach by tram long ago, and how hot she had felt in her button-up boots. She touched the medal and talked sadly of her big brother that she had loved, who had gone to the war and never returned. She smiled at the puppet on strings and remembered the one that she had shown to her sister, and how she had laughed with a mouthful of porridge. She bounced the football to Wilfred Gordon and remembered the day that she had met him and all the secrets they had told. And the two of them smiled and smiled, because Miss Nancy's memory had been found again by a small boy who wasn't very old either. Yeah.
Now is the time in our service we set aside to share among this community the joys, sorrows, and milestones that weigh deepest on our hearts. All are welcome to submit your joys and sorrows to be spoken aloud each week. First, Steve shares a joy. We want to thank everyone who has reached out to express their love of our mom. We will plan a memorial service for later in the spring so we can celebrate her life together. Anne shares a sorrow. Today marks 1 year since her friend Betty passed away. And now we light one more candle and hold space here together for all the happiness and heartache that remains unspoken, yet felt deeply within us all. Let's continue now in prayerful contemplation with some words from Reverend Barb.
Together, let us take a collective steady breath in and a slow exhale out. Holy One, whose presence is ever with us, yet whose name often eludes us, we give thanks for your presence in our lives. The world around us is not yet the paradise we imagine it could be. There is too much war and violence, too much poverty and need. Today, we hold in our hearts all the families who have lost loved ones this past week. May they be reminded of love and grace. We pray for the safety of citizens and soldiers around the globe. We pray for the victims of all authoritarianism and oppression. May we all know peace and safety, love and comfort. And may the energy we need to be compassionate, empathic, loving, caring, healing people be restored to each one of us, now and in the moments of our greatest need. Amen.
And now let's take 1 minute for some contemplative time of our own. Thank you. May you feel the love of this community from wherever you are. Amen.
Each time that we gather in this space, wherever that space is, we set aside time to ponder and consider our generosity and to share some of our gifts with this congregation. This congregation, as are all congregations in the Unitarian Universalist Association, they are all self-supporting. We receive no money from a place elsewhere than right here. It depends deeply on your generosity. And I see the ushers ready to pass the plate. Are we going to do that today? Do we want to do that today? Let's do that then today. Ministry is improv acting and saying yes and. And I hope we each can say yes and consider a contribution to our congregation. The Unitarian Universalist minister, Brandock Lovely, reminds us and invites us into this space with these words. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now keepers of this dream. The morning offering will be joyfully given and gratefully received.
This morning's reading is entitled, The Wisdom to Know the Difference by Sarah Moores Campbell. My colleague Harry Meserve described a pleasant surprise of advancing years, the discovery of areas of knowledge, activity, and enjoyment that he had never before had time for or even considered. This discovery, he writes, reminds one that no matter how distinguished, competent, and successful we may have been, we are now as little children who must be taught from the start how to make our way in other fields of knowledge and activity. Such experience is good for the soul. Aging is a lifelong process of adjustment to change. The people who age best are those who are granted serenity, as the famous prayer puts it. The serenity to accept the things they cannot change, the courage to change the things they can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Getting older is one of those things that cannot be changed. The losses are different for different people. Sometimes the loss means giving up possessions to move into a smaller home, or giving up independence to move in with a family member. Or it may be the loss of physical abilities, hearing, walking, seeing. Gradually, age reminds us that we can't do things we used to do. Age forces us to redefine ourselves in terms of what we can do. It is an art to be able to grow through the losses and accept the process without giving in to a spirit of decline. Aging is a process of growth, not of decline. I admire people who age well more than those who remain youthful. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference, for both may appear vital and alert. But one avoids the realities of the autumn season of life by pretending that it's still summer, while the other enjoys the brilliant colors.
I want to start this morning's sermon with a confession. Hospice chaplaincy work is not nearly as glamorous and serene as Hollywood would have you believe. I do not spend most of my time sitting quietly at the bedside, holding the hand of the soon-to-be deceased, offering the perfect, insightful words of grace and comfort. It does happen this way occasionally, but most of the time, my work is done in the weeks and months before someone dies, followed by a year or more accompanying and supporting the deceased's loved ones as they journey with their grief and learn to live in a new normal. Most often, my bedside work includes helping patients struggle to accept the loss of autonomy and freedoms they once enjoyed. It is about helping them make meaning of their lives, coming to terms with their regrets, and whenever possible, finding reconciliation for all that weighs on their minds and souls. In my work setting, I serve people of many faith traditions and some with no religious affiliation. I work with people from a wide spectrum of life experiences, economic resources, and countries of origin. Within all of this, I have found that there are some common themes among those who are aware that they are approaching their own deaths. As our reading this morning tells us, aging is a process of adjustment to change. One of the most common themes I observe with my patients and their loved ones is the struggle to accept changes in independence. They struggle to ask for and accept help. Who among us doesn't? It is not easy admitting that we can no longer do the things we were once able to do. Yet I have witnessed the joy adult children of my patients experience when they are able to care for their parents once everyone is over the hump of resistance and has adapted to the changing needs. Often, I find myself facilitating conversations among family members as they struggle to make decisions about care after a patient is no longer able to advocate for themselves. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of having those uncomfortable yet important conversations with your family. Clearly articulate when you want curative treatments and when you want comfort-focused care, when you want life-saving measures, and when it is time to let the body's natural limitations occur. But don't stop at these decisions. Discuss what you want after death, cremation or burial, elements to your memorial service, and whether or not you want a grave or grave marker are just as important. And then there are the unexpecteds. Just this past week, I was asked by a patient's daughter to help her ask her dying mother what her mother wants to be buried in. What a gift it would be if we all were able to have these conversations long before we or our loved ones are facing death head on. In my work, another common theme I often encounter is a fear of dying. For some, this fear is theologically grounded, born of years or decades or a lifetime of belief that they will be judged by a harsh deity for not living their lives properly enough, for not worshiping properly enough, or often enough. In these moments, I am thankful that our own Universalist theology reminds us of God's grace and love, that heaven and hell are what we create here on earth and not destinations we will be sent to after judgment is placed on our lives. But for most of the people I work with who fear death, it is not a fear of what happens after they die, but rather a fear that the dying process itself will be painful. Because death is not something most of us experience more than once, we can only imagine what dying will be like, and our imaginations have the amazing capacity to bring forth the worst possible options. Thus, we are left fearing dying. One of the blessings of hospice care is that we have figured out how to keep people physically and medically comfortable at the end of life. Our goal is always to maximize the quality of life one has for whatever time they have left. And quality of life includes pain management through the end of life. Because of this, it is rare that a patient experiences anything less than physical peace as they die. But getting to a place of trusting this takes many patients and their families time and assurance. As we are building that trust, I invite my patients to reflect on their lives, exploring with them what has brought them the most meaning and what has caused them the most strife. I have observed that most regrets revolve around strained or discontinued relationships with loved ones and friends. And some have shared regrets of things done or not done, as was the case with patient M. I was on call and received a page to rush to the hospital to visit M. I entered her room knowing only that M was the 96-year-old matriarch of her family, and she had requested the chaplain visit as soon as possible to hear her confession. I had been told she was Baptist. She filled less than half the bed and looked frail of body, though there was still a brightness in her eyes. Surrounding her bed were several members of her family, 5 full generations worth, holding vigil. There was a somber feel to the group, and a brief hush rippled through the room when I entered. I introduced myself as the chaplain, moving to stand bedside and take her hand as she reached out to me. I asked her if she'd like to speak privately or in front of her family. In a weak, shaky voice, she answered, "Privately." The family respectfully left the room, closing the door behind them as I sat in one of the chairs by her bed, still holding her hand. She was dying. I knew it, and she knew it. "What's on your mind today?" I asked her. There was something about her, a properness that was almost palpable. She gently squeezed my hand and in a whisper said, "Will you hear my confession?" "Of course," I replied, after clarifying her religion. In her shaky voice, she said, "I must confess that I have never sworn in my life, but always wanted to. I would very much like to try doing so before I die." "Okay. Would you like to do so now?" I asked. She gently nodded, took a steady, long breath in, and out came a stream of profanity, the likes of which I had never heard before. We maintained deep eye contact as she swore, and as she whispered the last few words, we smiled and broke out into silly giggles. She squeezed my hand, said thank you, bring my family back in, then closed her eyes and breathed her last breath. As I reflected on my visit afterwards, I wondered how her life might have been different if she had chosen to swear earlier in her life. Would that have changed the ways her family interacted with and loved her? Would she have found the same level of glee at the end of life? Another of my patients, patient D, taught me about the importance of not waiting until the very end to do that which you've always dreamed of doing. By the time she and I met, she was too weak to walk any distance further than across her bedroom. She was in her early 90s and was declaratively not a religious person, though was delighted that anyone would come visit her. We would play cribbage together, and during our games, out came bits and pieces of her life story. One of my favorite stories was from her 80th birthday. She shared with me that as a young woman, she had always wanted to experience being on the beach with the sun shining down upon her naked body. Shortly before her birthday, she fell ill and decided that before she was too sick to do so, she would go to the local nude beach. She inspired two of her closest friends, both a good 20 and 30 years younger, to join her. The three of them took an hour's bus ride to their beach of choice, but when they arrived, her friends decided that they were not comfortable entering the beach. Undeterred by their choice, Dee left her clothes with her friends and gently and determinedly streaked across the beach. As we talked and she reflected on her life, Dee shared with me that after raising her children into good human beings, the thing she was next most proud of was that she fulfilled her desire for that beach experience, that she didn't let age or embarrassment or fear stop her from doing something she had wanted to do most of her life. Both M and D remind us of the importance of embracing and doing the things we've always wanted to do, particularly if those things will bring us glee and joy. Thankfully, our faith does not teach us a theology of denial, but rather encourages us to embrace life and experience. It reminds us that the here and now are important, just as how we treat one another is important. In his meditation in Been in the Storm So Long, a Skinner House Books meditation manual, Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Mark Morrison Reed offers us a wonderful theology of living and dying. He writes, "We are all dying, our lives always moving toward completion. We need to learn to live with death and to understand that death is not the worst of all events. We need to fear not death, but life. Empty lives, loveless lives, lives that do not build upon the gifts that each of us have been given, lives that are like living deaths, lives which we never take the time to savor and appreciate, lives in which we never pause to breathe deeply. What we need to fear is not death, but squandering the lives we have been miraculously given." He continues, "So let me die laughing, savoring one of life's surprising moments. Let me die holding the hand of one I love, and recalling that I tried to love and was loved in return. Let me die remembering that life has been good and that I did what I could. But today, just remind me that I am dying so that I can live, savor, and love with all my heart. The inevitable end of life is death. It is not something that we need to be feared, but rather embraced as the conclusion of a life lived well. And in those circumstances where we may struggle to believe we did not live our lives as well as we could, we need to find forgiveness. There is a Sufi tradition at funerals, wherein those in attendance are asked to forgive the deceased for any transgressions they may have made against us. And we are invited to forgive ourselves for any ways in which we may have let the deceased down. I find this tradition to be a powerful reminder that through forgiveness, we can find peace of heart and soul. Forgiveness is a spiritual act. It is an invitation to restoration and release. There are some actions that may not be forgivable, though in my experience, finding a way to forgive ourselves for being the recipient of harmful actions can be a way towards inner peace and can help us face our own life and death without fear and anger. May you live, savor, and love with all your heart. May you find forgiveness for yourself and those around you. And in return, may you feel the love of all that is holy, now and forevermore. Amen.
Our time together is drawing to a close for this morning, so I extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the infinite peace to you. Go in peace.